Righto, champs. Right, oh, right, oh. Actually, was very. I was ahead of myself with what I needed to do. Uh, yeah, I started up the YouTube or the recording earlier than I was ready for. Yeah, I wasn't even in the Discord yet. Oh man, what it's like taking a week off. You totally forget. You totally disorient yourself with what you need to do in order to get a responsibility back up and running again. But I guess we'll start off with some news. So it was suggested to me that I should, or that I could take on like a bi weekly podcast schedule. And I think I might stick to that actually. So I think this helps out with like not okay. So I'm gonna be honest here with the with how the podcast has been going. So I've been a little guilty about not getting stuff out on time. Plus, I think it's becoming a little more draining on me than what I would hope for. So I'm hoping that through a bi-weekly schedule, I can start maintaining the other responsibilities a bit better without feeling the guilt of trying to get something going every Sunday. So instead, we're gonna try like every other Sunday, and I think that'll be like the new schedule, probably starting today. I mean, last week we obviously didn't have that, and I updated everyone in the Discord of what that was. But I guess for my own segments, I probably won't be generating the content every week. If there's a week that like someone else wanted to speak up on anything, they could totally host that. I would just need to. I would just need to hop in on that Sunday and then start the recording session for that. Either that or I guess what I could offer other people if they really wanted to, if they wanted to do like a Sunday, if they wanted to do a Sunday slot where I'm not here, or maybe I don't even want to participate in one of them, someone could host it on their own. I could probably just record it on their session and then just be able to give me like the video link for me to upload it to the whole brand podcast brand. So that'd be pretty neat. I think I actually like that idea. I might have if someone wanted to like do their own podcast for the brand, they could totally do that. So I was thinking about how like having a bot within the Discord that did like recordings on a command basis. So someone would like type a command in, and then the bot would go over to like the podcast stage, and then someone would just be able to like self-record using like all the defaults that the bot would have generated with the video recording system that it'd be using. So yeah, it would be in like to be honest, that would be a great way for me to like get out of the picture too. Like if I'm like ever gone or like I can't make it, or even if I like lag out in the middle of a of a podcast, which is totally possible, and I'm pretty sure that's happened before too. If that ever happened, I could just like the content itself um, wouldn't deteriorate in correlation with my appearance. So having those two abstract would be really good here. Anyhow, I don't know if anyone's coming today. I definitely didn't post it. I posted the topic for today or the outline today like last week. I made a couple adjustments to it, um, but I think for the most part, everyone knew what we were gonna get into for this week. But yeah, we shall give it a try. So anyhow, I think that's all for the updates that I wanted. Time to get into what we're talking about today. So as already listed, I was going to talk about like finding meaning, and part of this was coming up because I felt I had like a change in values over the past like 3-ish months, I would say. So maybe like September is when I stopped like working out. I was still like looking for friends. Like, most everything was pretty stable until I guess maybe December is a better way to put it. Like mid December, I started losing like a bunch of meaning. No, that's not true. I think September was probably a good association with that. So I was playing like this game called Escape from Tarkov like pretty often, and it was almost like addiction level like consumption, and so I'd be up like long nights. I'd have a terrible sleep schedule, uh, and it was a pretty foreign sleep schedule too. Like I'd be going to bed at like noon and then waking up at like 8 in the evening. That's like some of the worst part. And then like over the past couple weeks, I've been re-rotating everything by like an hour. So shifting everything like an hour up until I was at like going to bed at midnight and waking up at 8 in the morning. And now I'm like even further along that rotation forward where I'm going to bed at like 4 p.m. or 4 a.m. So I'm like 4 hours rotated forward from that. And then I'm waking up at like 12 or noon. But I'm feeling good with this other rotation though, because a lot of my progress between my responsibilities happened best with this schedule so far. Because when I was losing weight like about a year ago, or when I started losing weight, I was on this schedule, and it was working out for me really well. So, you know, I think I found like that that schedule has an impressionable, or I don't know, that the whole schedule was impressionable towards the progress that I wanted to see myself going towards. So I would say that I found meaning through that schedule itself because I felt like I was doing something at the most optimal way that I could have been doing things in the way in what I wanted to do. Oh, I guess another thing I forgot to mention, the mic quality is probably a lot better now too. So, yeah, I finally invested in a microphone, and I was talking it over with my dad about like what could have happened from the past one, um, and unfortunately, I like shock my microphone a lot. I shock my computer a lot actually. So when I'm like picking up my blanket and then I just run over to my computer, I generate a lot of static. And then when I touch like either my mouse or my keyboard or my microphone, namely, I think it ends up ruining the cord. And so that's why that was the death of my old microphone. I've got the same brand microphone now, pretty much a brand new one. Hopefully I won't hopefully I won't shock it as many times. I'd hope I'd learn my lesson for this time around. Okay, anyways, from the sidetrack. So in terms of the outline for today, I think we'll start off with what does finding meaning, or when does finding meaning become important? And I think for most people, they generate this list of, so if you conceptualize like meaning as a list of things that are associated to you, you understand that that list kind of fluctuates up and down based on the experiences that you have with the different things that are on this list. And so I think like something could totally be ruined by one experience, and then you can also gain a lot of meaning through yeah. So I think like I think the experiences that you have contributing to a activity or a hobby or anything really does fluctuate. And I think when you like finding meaning becomes important when you don't feel like you have enough things that keep you inspired towards what you want to be. So I think what the reason why like having meaning in the first place is important is because it keeps you motivated to continue on. I think there's like an existential level layer that is being powered through this list of what is meaningful to you. And so I think you need to have a healthy balance of having enough things on that list, and which is a really interesting way to put it. So imagine if you didn't have like enough things that are meaningful on this list to you. Do you end up like, yeah, and then the idea of having too many things. Did I say that right? Too little things and too many things. Those are like the two ideas that I was going to bring upon this podcast today. Wow, damn! It's been a long time since I've spoken. Sheesh, I can't even speak anymore. Um, so the next bullet point on the podcast is what gives you meaning. So if I go over like some specifics for myself, I would say like video games is pretty fun. I don't know if it's meaningful necessarily, but I think like in the same way that people don't think drinking is meaningful, people find that the like drinking as an activity with other people is like the experience that is meaningful to them. So I think in the same way like video games is meaningful as a means to something else or to like some other dimension that I'm getting from the experience itself. And there's some mastery elements in there that I think provides meaning for me, but then there's also the social aspect of playing video games too. So there's like the whole muscle memory, gauging your brain off of reaction time, and your reaction time as a dimension is your expertise or your test against other people. It's how you compete. So there's various dimensions to why video games could be like a meaningful activity as a whole, but what you get away from the experience is really what is the meaningful dimensions of that event or of that activity. So I think video games is one of that. You also have, I mean, like my friends are definitely meaningful to me. Just yesterday, I had someone who bared bad news to me, and it's not that it was necessarily bad news in of itself, but it had some effect on the relationship I had with this person. And for me, I guess that scream like the negative emotion that I felt after receiving the news, I guess is an indicator that that relationship to me is meaningful. I guess a couple weeks ago, or like a couple, yeah, I guess a couple weeks ago. Yeah, a couple weeks ago, I had someone else also change behaviors with how they speak, or like the frequency of our communication as well has been diminishing. And before we used to talk all the time, and so like the is it still meaningful to communicate with this person? Absolutely. It's just I wish I could in the passion of what's meaningful to me, I wish I could spend more time with them. And unfortunately, the conditions don't allow for that. So you can also like the reason I'm saying all that is because you can find meaning in your relationships with other people, but sometimes those relationships and the dynamics of those change. Um, they're not permanent, and so is it meaningful to develop relationships knowing that they're not permanent? Probably. I mean, I would say they're still meaningful to me. I think they left like a good impression of my mind of this person. But then this abstracts. You can take that idea and that sentiment and you can abstract that to other relationships that you know, such as like, say you have like exes. You know, you have this positive mindset of or you have these positive experiences that you can fall back to with another person. And I think the reason why like exes get back together is because they realize the kind of value that that other person was bringing them in those good experiences. So then they end up having that same attachment. And that's the reason why like detaching yourself from another person is so hard, especially when they've had like that kind of level of significant value to you, um, or rather that significant relationship status with you. So I think the people around you also give you meaning. Your identity should very forefrontly give you the most meaning out of everything. If your identity isn't giving you meaning, then I think you I think you run into a lot of other problems, and you won't be able to see any of the other reasons why. Like all your relationships then become like useless, because if you can't even understand like why you're acting the way you are, and you don't feel meaning about the character that you are, then you're going to start judging how other people are valuing you when you can't even see the value in you. So I think identity ends up being like the very forefront. In terms of like the hierarchy, you need your identity as the foundation. And then everything else can start like building meaning from there. Or like other dimensions will start bringing you meaning after that. And you also have like hobbies. You got like some consumption and provider responsibilities. So, which I think consumption as like a dimension of meaning is pretty. It's like a weird. It's weird. It's really weird. So say you want to like, I don't know. We'll get into that into like in a second here. I'll start off with like the hobbies one, because that's the one I started with in the list. But yeah, you could, I suppose, some people like, I don't know, on my Instagram stories right now, or like on my Instagram feed, I have a bunch of people who are into like toning their bodies as much as possible, or as much as they want to, and the results are like clear. Like they're super hot. It's usually a bunch of guys who've muscled out. They're weightlifting their maximum amount. And yeah, you get to see the results of all the work that they put into themselves. And I guess that's a hobby. And it's a hobby that they've revolved their identity around. It's who they are. And they find that meaningful. I think it's pretty awesome and inspiring for, for anyone who needs like whoever wants to be as fit as they are. I think that's pretty awesome. And you got like other consumption habits. So there are some people who I think there's some people who find meaning through buying shoes. And that was like the very first idea that came up for me in the past like 10 seconds, because I used to be like a teaching assistant for the University of Washington's coding boot camp. And there was a student in there much older than me. There was a student in there who liked buying shoes and went out to these events where they did like auction houses for for shoes. And I don't know the whole realm, so if I threw out a buzzword right now, I'd sound like the biggest dumbass possible, so I'm not going to say them. But I think you got like, okay, I'm going to say it anyways cuz I don't really care about looking like a dumbass. I think you got like Jordan shoes. I'm not too sure. But yeah, he was like talking over these events as if they were like, I don't know. To me, shoes are shoes. Besides like the besides like the foot fetish aspect of me, shoes are just generally shoes. If I see tennis shoes, I see tennis shoes. That's really as far as it goes. But to this guy, it's like, these shoes are so exclusive and something to get super hyped about. And I don't know how you. This one just doesn't make sense to me because I think we also need to describe the relationship between like a consumption, finding meaning through consumption, and finding meaning through like providing. Are those like two, say like, do you have to split 100% between like consumption and provider responsibilities, and you find like balance between like a 20/80 or 80/20 split with how that dynamic happens, or are they just like their own separate entities? I think if you guys wanted to, maybe you guys would have like some thought of to that, or maybe you don't. Maybe I'm just on some mumbo jumbo that nobody understands about like what I mean by like consumption or provider meaningful acts. But yeah, I think people also do that with cars. So people talk about like their dream car and whatnot. And I think that's a pretty common one too. It's like everyone has an understanding of what kind of car looks cool to them. And I think that reflects on their choice, reflects on their identity to some degree. Like some people want like old fashioned cars, like from the 1950s, and then you got like Lambos and whatnot, Ferraris. Yeah, these people are nuts. I just think a car is a car. Maybe I need to go explore that realm though, and like figure out what car would be like the best one for me, or what's like my dream car is. As if like if I had the money, would I go buy like my dream car? I don't know. It's an interesting thought. And then you also have like provider responsibilities. So I think like a pretty common one for a pretty common female. I'm totally gonna genericize this shit, and I really shouldn't. But I have like a female friend who's like a nanny, right? And it's like I couldn't understand why you would want to be a nanny for as like a 24-year-old or 25-year-old. It's like, is that family responsibility what you want to do as a person? Like the kind of work that you bring to people and taking care of like family members, raising the next generation, making connections with like with kids. Is that what you want to be doing? What kind of meaning are you gaining from that? I don't actually know. But yeah, I think those are like the normal three dimensions of, I guess, meanings, like external meanings, other than like your relationships and your identity itself. I have a weird question in this outline, which is when these all fail to give you meaning, where do you go next? And I had a very okay. I was watching anime last night, and it's this anime called My Dress Up Darling, and most people would be like, "Oh, you weeb," and I'm gonna say the same thing. I'm such a weeb, but there was a moment, a scene, where the main character gets overburdened with meaning or overburdened with responsibilities. He was like, the character is um, weighing out between his own hobby, his own passions, someone else's passions. No, not someone else's passions. Two other people's passions. His own like school responsibilities. What else? And his job responsibility. So he had like a job responsibility, a hobby responsibility, person A's responsibility, and person B responsibility, and his school responsibility. So he had like five dimensions of, or not five dimensions, but like five different things that he needed to pay attention to, as well as like house responsibilities. And so he had all six, and he had to like choose how many, or like how many hours that he could like put into each of these responsibilities. And in the end, he was just like so overburdened with these responsibilities that he pretty much broke down. And so when you're stressed to the max and you realize that you're just not that, like, even though you may be spending time with certain responsibilities in the hopes that, you know, or I don't even know why you would choose to tend to all those responsibilities in itself, but I think you can find meaning through responsibility, but you can't but if you're overburdened with responsibility, then you lose the meaning, because then you can't keep up with the meaning or with the responsibilities that you want to be tending to. And so that's where the idea comes in of having too many. And then at that point, there was a defining moment or defining scene in that anime episode where he's pretty much just laying on his bed and he's just like crying his ass off because he's like half-assed every responsibility that of the six. And you know, when I made that alignment for myself, because I've definitely felt that way, when I had that experience myself, I took it in a much different direction than he took it, the character took it, which was like, if I'm half assing everything, then I've pretty much, like, my life is so meaningless that I can't keep up with the responsibilities that I've set myself out to do. I can't finish all of them, so therefore I should give up. That was like the conclusion I came to. What was refreshing to see is that the character was reminded by someone else's method to meaning. And she should still have some food, I think. The what?
I think she's hungry.
Oh. Oh, excuse me for a sec. How to let my cat in, excuse me. But yeah, it was refreshing to see that the anime character instead was reminded by his inspiration. So someone like a um, like a model character in his life was his grandpa. His grandpa had mentioned that, like, the meaning that he got through the hobby, the shared hobby that him and his grandson, the main character, was that seeing other people's smiling faces and their true content, their true form of content with the hobby that he spent so much of his life to. there was no other, there was no better sense of meaning than his provider responsibility to other people and bringing them happiness. And so when the main character was reminded by that, he was inspired through different perspectives that he had to generate for himself to be remotivated towards what was important to him. So that was a defining moment of re-understanding what meaning was and then pursuing what meaning was. And he was inspired to see someone else smile. And so that's why he ended up returning back to one of his main responsibilities, the one that he felt like the most guilty over. Because if he didn't return back to that responsibility, he felt like he wasn't going to. He was going to be letting someone important in his life down. So when everything fails, when everything about your I yeah, pretty much everything failed for him. So in terms of like the list that I've had before of the identity, the people around you, the hobbies, consumption, provider, responsibilities. He pretty much went through a crisis where all of those failed for him. So he couldn't help the people around him. He couldn't keep up with his hobby because he needed other responsibilities done. He couldn't even provide for himself at that point. Like he was lacking in sleep. I think his diet wasn't too great either, and he wasn't able to provide for himself anymore because he was still stressing over all the responsibilities. And at that point, he was also questioning his identity as if like he was half-assing everything. When all of those fail, you go into a crisis of not knowing like what you're even doing anymore. And so I think having the foundation of your identity at the very least is what's gonna what's gonna keep the rest of them in check, or rather, like keep your whole mindset in check. When you start to see like some of these dimensions losing value, meaning value to you, how do you fill the gap? I'm trying to think of something that has dropped in meaning to me. So at some point in time, I thought I'd be giving back as like a okay. So like, I have a swimming background, competitive swimming background. I did like a club level sport, and so I went out to like these swimming competitions and whatnot, and I've stuck with the same guy who's taught me how to swim from like 10 years old. Um, Joined his club, and then also like worked for him as a lifeguard, swim instructor, and a swim coach for the team he's associated with. So I've been around with this guy for a long time, and I think as I was transitioning out of high school and I was looking for more responsibility, I thought of giving back to the community through my expertise, not so much expertise, but like my knowledge in swimming. And so I asked the guy if I could be like a swim coach, and he said, "Yeah, sure." And as I was going through those experiences of giving back to the community, I was realizing that like all the added garbage that all the added garbage that you had to deal with the responsibility itself wasn't worth it to me. So the benefit was is that I felt like I was sharing my knowledge with the people who wanted to hear it, but then there were also a lot of other challenges that came along with that. And so slowly but surely the sentiment of wanting to give back to the community about my swimming knowledge was like dissipating because I felt like it wasn't worth it to me. It wasn't as meaningful anymore. So what do you do when you lose stuff meaningful to you in that way? If it's a gradual loss, then I guess you need to start searching for like something else to fill the gap. That's the thought, anyways. So, in terms of maintaining this list of what's meaningful to you, you got to make sure that as you're losing things, that you're still adding some on at the same time. How do you fill the gap though? I don't know if there's necessarily a gap that you need to fill. So, say if like the passion for swimming was still there, or sorry, the passion for okay. Say we drop the passion for sharing this like the swimming knowledge with other people, and I wanted to fill that gap with something else. Do I do something similar or do I find like something completely different? It's hard to tell. I don't think I have enough life experience to make a conclusion based off of the information or the experiences that I know. I think other people would have like a differing perspective on that question. How do you know when there's too many things that are meaningful to you? I think the second you start to feel like the responsibilities of the various things that you want to be tending to is too much. So much so that like you're half-assing everything. I think in the same scenario which I described with the main character of the anime, um, I think that's I think that's when you know that you have too many things on your plate. You're gonna have to drop some things that are meaningful to you, or at least like be at peace with the decision to drop some meaningful things to you if you know that you can return to them at a different time. I think understanding that you as a resource and being able to share experiences with the various things that are meaningful to you, you need to understand that you can't do it all, especially if you have that like that many things. Unless if you, I don't know. I think some people are usually good at about like holding off on what's meaningful to them if it means that they can return to it in the future. Like they're at peace with that decision. But some people when they start to have way too many things that they want to be that they want to tend to, then they end up having a problem where they end up like losing they end up mismanaging their time and almost like crippling down as the previous scenario described. So I think understanding that balancing and time management is usually the way to go for you to understand or mentally prepare, be at peace with the idea that you can't spend time with everything all the time in the way that you want to allocate you as a resource to. So I think being good at both those things enables you to expect when you're gonna be spending time with your passions. And I'll just keep it at that. Describe the process of finding something that's meaningful. You know, I think this one's pretty hard. I'm pretty reserved as a person. I think I'm very conservative when it comes to passions, and so I just do something, and if it if I like it, I like it. If I don't, I don't. But it's very rare that I go out and do something like that. So the frequency of when I'm expanding my passions is very small. Um, I'm willing to do that with my relationships, but not with like hobbies and like provider responsibilities. Whatever I want to do, I just want to stick with it, and I'm reserved to any change when it comes to like the hobbies consumption provider responsibilities. And maybe that's a bad thing. I think other people could probably speak to this a bit more, but for me, it just it feels like if I'm if I'm rarely introduced to something, it's probably against my will. And if I'm introduced to it and I like it, then I'm probably gonna keep doing it. So I guess I wouldn't have too much to say about that. I think it just needs to be like you need to be willing to open your or expose yourself to different passions or to different activities in hopes that you'll find meaning from it. Should you be insecure of what's meaningful to you? Yeah, yeah. And the best case I have for that is like, say if you're a pedophile. This took a really dark turn, but say you're a pedophile, right? You should be insecure from a societal collective standpoint that you are not that passion is not desirable in what you would see in someone and it's harmful. So is there some insecurity that you should feel towards that? Who knows? Maybe not. But the problem is that you're going to have to deal with everyone else who will judge your identity off of that. Can other people judge what's meaningful to you and when does that matter? I mean, as the situation I just described, yeah, people can totally judge you off of what you find is meaningful. And it matters when It's against the law. So, and you could argue that like just the law is just a collection of rules that the society has generated, and that rule set is definitely different from society to society. To so who's to say that the society you're living in is the correct one for the passion that you have? It's a good question. It's a hard question to answer from that situation though. So I guess I have a couple more points in here, and then I think I'm going to call it off. But some that I've added on since last week is how to find your identity. And now that I think about it, I think I've already spoken to that in a different outline or in a different podcast. Yeah, I had the progressing your identity about like a month and a half ago. So I won't speak to that anymore, but definitely finding meaning in your own identity is probably the most fundamental thing that you should be building what's meaningful, or your hierarchy of what's meaningful to you off of. So how do you assess the people around you? If it's affecting your identity or it's affecting your hobbies, consumption, or your provider roles, I think understanding that you can drop anyone you want to if you think they're not helping you. But you still need to keep relationships around in case, because like even if it's a sub list of the list of things that are meaningful to you, the people around you are like still a meaningful dimension to be wary of. So you can't just drop everyone, but you can definitely drop people, and you can add people to the list too. So having a healthy balance for that. I mean, everyone's healthy balance is different, but at least make sure you know of your range, and that you keep it within that range. How to know when to pick up or drop a hobby. I think everyone has a pretty good understanding of like when a hobby's not really doing you justice. If you, like every once in a while I get sick of gaming so much so that I just put it down. I just don't deal with it anymore. I have that. I've also put down like my workout habits every once in a while, and then I'm reminded that my identity kind of needs that, so then I pick it up again. So, when consumption becomes addiction. So understanding that like your consumption habits could become like something so negative for you that you're having a hard time like having a healthy balance of your consumption habits. So there's a lot of people who buy like several cars. I mean, if you can financially afford it, go for it, but if it's going to sacrifice other aspects of you financially, such as your ability to survive, or I don't know, yeah, pretty much your ability to survive or anything else that's meaningful to you, then you have to understand that like you're, as much as you want to humor your passion as much as possible, sometimes you're not able to do that. And so I think some people do the drug addiction route, and they lose everything through it, but they're finding something meaningful that, and then end up like not having. And well, I don't know. It's hard to back out of like a drug addiction when you've like spent so much of your life dedicating to the passion. But it's like everything else, you need to have a boundary for that, for yourself, in order to make sure that you're keeping yourself in check from being too addicted to the passion itself. And we already talked about like being overburdened with responsibility. But that last point was in response to like being overly yeah, overburdened with like provider responsibilities. And I think that's about the same. Okay. Yeah, I'm actually cool with that. But anyhow, I'm sorry the podcast didn't go that great today. I felt like a lot of the sentences didn't merge together. The thoughts didn't come out too great. Um, First day back though from the 2 week period. I've gotten a lot done in the past 2 weeks. So rest assured, I'm like kind of happy with what actually ended up happening through that. I guess one piece of good news that I have to share with the podcast in the group or with my friends, which I mean everyone here is my friend, anyways. But um, I did end up talking with the hiring manager at T-Mobile, and it sounds like the team that I might be a part of is like a part of the retail service. So I might be in charge of the application side of things for 85% of the whole revenue that T-Mobile has coming in. So I might be in charge of something, or at least like I might be contributing to something that's very substantial to T-Mobile as like a company as like a business. So, but the conversation went great. It was a great time. I have a feeling that everything is going to go through, but as of right now, I'm just waiting around. We had that meeting on Friday, so you know, it's not a business day. So waiting around until more information. Anyhow, enough about me. Thank you guys for listening. I think I'll see you guys in 2 weeks. I don't know what we'll talk about though. So unless if we have like someone who's passionate enough to generate a topic for next week, I'll just be seeing you guys 2 weeks from now, for whatever I end up picking from.